Hey everybody, I'm Joshua Orro, the Mustang Prince, and welcome to Mustang Prince Orro Reports. And today, I'm being joined by another guest, and another one whom you've met before. So please, help me in welcoming back my sister, Sabrina Orro.
Hi, what's up?
So, for this episode, I think Sabrina should give a little bit of an introduction of what we're going to be talking about today. Sabrina?
Well, today, I did not mean to interrupt you, but I did because I'm just so darn excited. Today we are going to be talking about the 2015 in France / 2016 in America animated movie, The Little Prince. Whoa!
Anyway, don't you have something to talk about that's connected to what this film is?
What do you mean connected to what this film is?
Well, say about 5 years ago during your college age.
Oh, like talk about my personal connection to the film? So actually, pretty much right when the film was announced that it was going to be happening, my college that I went to did a production of The Little Prince. And I was cast in the show as a member of the ensemble, which was really fun because if you've read the book before, it has a bunch of different fun characters throughout the story, and the members of the ensemble got to play a bunch of different characters. So I personally played characters that were mostly involved in the natural world of the play. So I played things like a wall of roses, or wind in a storm, or a planet, or a volcano, things like that. And it involved a lot of modern dance and fun sculptures, and I think that's all I gotta say. So anyway, that's why he has me here.
Anyway, for those who don't know, the book became one of Antoine's most successful works.
Antoine who?
I can't pronounce it. My French sucks.
No, it's okay.
Anyway, my point is, it is the author's most successful story, selling at least 140 million copies worldwide, and it also made it one of the best-selling and most translated story ever published. It also has been translated into about 361 languages and dialects, and has been adapted into numerous art forms, as well as media, including audio recordings, plays, live stage, film, television, ballet, and opera.
Wow.
And when I read the book at Barnes & Noble's not long after I saw Sabrina's show, I thought it was very, shall we say, interesting, but also emotional at the same time.
What I really like about the story is that it puts very adult things into a box that's easy for people of all ages to handle.
So anyway, like Sabrina said, not long after the show was put on at Cal Poly, we've heard news about an animated feature which would be released originally during March of 2016. But does this movie still hold up even after its digital release to Netflix? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Released in France on July 29th, 2015, and in the United States on Netflix on August 5th, 2016, the movie is The Little Prince. So, let's start off with a summary of the movie. A little girl is being prepared by her mother for the very grown-up world, only to be interrupted by her eccentric but kind-hearted neighbor, the Aviator. The Aviator introduces his new friend to an extraordinary world where anything is possible. A world that he once initiated into a long time ago by the Little Prince. It's here that the little girl's magical and emotional journey into her own imagination and into the universe of the Little Prince begins, and where the little girl rediscovers her childhood and learns that ultimately it's human connections that matters the most, and what's truly essential can only be seen with the heart. So, what do we think of this movie? Well, in my honest opinion, it's good, but there are some parts that could have been done a bit better. What about you, Sabrina?
Well, I would say all in all, I like it. It gives me the same feeling that the original story and the play gives me at the end. But I would also say there's a couple choices that I found interesting, and I don't know if I necessarily agreed with.
But let's move on to Mustang notes now.
Disclaimer, as we're starting the Mustang notes, there are a couple words throughout our notes that are French, and neither of us speak French. So we're going to do our best, but please be patient and understanding as we destroy the French language together. Thank you.
Okay, so the movie was directed by Mark Osborne, who's best known for directing DreamWorks' Kung Fu Panda. The film features a framing device, which is not really present in the book, with a schoolgirl discovering the little prince through a reclusive elderly neighbor. Mark Osborne made the film's main character a little girl after research from the Gina Davis Institute on Gender in Media, revealing the gender disparity among characters in the animated films.
The film uses computer animation for the girl's world and stop-motion animation for the world of the Little Prince. Development and storyboarding of the film was completed in Paris. The team then moved to Montreal for the final phases of animation, lighting, color, and production in order to maximize the tax benefits offered to French-Canadian project, a co-venture between Onyx Entertainment in Paris and Micros Image Canada in Montreal. One of the film's associate producers is Bryce Garnier from Canada's Caribou Production, who served production on the 3D animation and stop motion, along with financing, tax credits, gap financing, and local taxes. Studio partners were Studio Micros, Image Canada, Titan Cartoon Canada, and Technicolor, who helped with the picture and sound post-production.
The film premiered on May 22nd, 2015 at the 68th Cannes Film Festival in an out-of-competition screening, followed by a wide release in France by Paramount. The U.S. theatrical release was set for a release date of March 18, 2016, but it was sadly dropped due to budget cuts. Thankfully, Netflix later acquired the U.S. distribution rights and released it on August 5, 2016. But, thankfully, I managed to get a DVD copy from Amazon a few days later. And now, let's talk a little bit about the animation. And, to me, not only does this movie include good CGI and stop motion, but it also has some good hand-drawn animation for the illustrations. And also, I feel like the stop-motion figures look like they were made from paper origami.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's just how I see it, but I could be wrong, though.
I think that was the point, Joshua. I think that's why they made that choice. I also think it was a really good choice because it really separates the world of reality from the world of imagination as they're describing the path of the Little Prince. Also, a little fun fact. Well, it's a fun fact for those of you who don't know, but I'm sure anyone who's read the original story knows. But the animations that are for the hand drawings actually imitate the original drawings that are in the book. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sabrina. And also there are some certain plot points we should talk about. For example, the idea of the movie switching from the little girl going into a study program to learning about the Little Prince kind of makes me think of the Lorax for some reason. I mean, it's kind of like a similar idea.
Yeah.
But also there are some issues I have with the little girl going into being forced to be a grown-up. it just kind of feels a bit too forced, in my opinion.
Do you mean the fact that she's being put into that program, that the girl herself is being forced, or that storyline is being forced?
Well, it's a little bit of both. Like, going through all summer just to study and not caring about anything else, all by herself.
Mm-hmm.
And also, our main character's mother is kind of a bit rude at times. I mean, she rudely throws away an apology note and a flower.
That's true, but I think what's good about it is that it does point out something that is really real for a lot of people. From the film, it's clear that the mother is a single mother who is doing a middle-class working job, but it's clear that she's had to work very hard in order to sustain her own life and her daughter. There's even mention in the film that the only way that they were allowed to, or not allowed to, but able to afford their house was because it was reduced pricing. And so the mother herself is going through a financial struggle and is trying to create the best future possible for her daughter. And so while it's unfortunate that her daughter is being forced to work so hard, it's because her mother is trying so desperately to give her daughter a better and brighter future than she herself has had. And I think that is an important storyline because I do think that is relatable for a lot of people. And there's even some people who have even less than the mother and the daughter pair do in the film.
Also, there's one thing I found interesting aside from the animation, the music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some parts of the music do give a feeling of the old days, like the 1930s or the times when airplanes were really big during the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the music composers, believe it or not, was Hans Zimmer.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I mean, but what do you think about other parts of the music, Sabrina?
I don't know. In general, I feel like it has a feeling of whimsy, which is very fitting to the film, but it's a whimsy that still has a maturity to it, which again just fits the story because it's a whimsical tale, but it deals with a lot of real adult problems.
And also the sequences involving the Little Prince in the movie is kind of similar to the story, though the last bit of it is very heartbreaking.
How so?
Where, well, okay, the prince leaving his rose behind, and there are also some strange imaginary creatures that the prince comes across, like a king, a businessman who counts stars, and a man who likes to tip his hat whenever someone claps,
Mm-hmm.
as well as a fox.
That's true.
Though I feel like didn't you tell me a while ago that there was a character who was absent from the book?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's actually two characters. There is a geographer who's on a planet that he visits who's not included in the movie, and a lamplighter who he visits who is not included in the movie. However, it's fun because later on, when they are flying back to the Little Prince's planets, both of those planets are still there. We still see them. And also, some of the lines that the lamplighter says, for instance, are still included in the script. The Little Prince himself says it when he's an adult. So, pretty cool.
And speaking of which, that's another little issue we have with this. The final climax, while it's had dark, it's kind of slow.
True. It takes a long time.
And anyway, now that we're done with Mustang notes, let's talk about the characters and the voice actors who brought it to life. Let's begin with our main character, the little girl as she's credited, voiced by Mackenzie Foy, who got to be in the Boxcar Children, and she played Clara Stahlbaum from Disney's The Nutcracker and the Four Realms. The little girl is a smart and, precocious child, plus she has a very inquisitive mind, and she struggles to balance growing up and basking in her childhood. Fun fact, director Osborne describes the little girl as a representation of the spirit of adulthood. To me, I think Mackenzie Floyd does a pretty good job voicing her, giving her a bit of curious and cute personality, and I can deeply sympathize with all the struggles that she's going through while maturing in the real world.
That's true.
What are your thoughts on the character?
I don't know. I think the character is a fun way to give the audience a way into the tale as opposed to the more traditional, conventional way that the story itself is told. I think that the actress did a wonderful job portraying her, and yeah, I found it easy to relate and empathize to the main character.
Next, we have the Aviator, voiced by Jeff Bridges, who got to be in such classic films like Tron, The Last Unicorn, Marvel's Iron Man, and Sony's Surf's Up. Now, in the film, the Aviator is an elderly and retired person who has witnessed and befriended the Little Prince in the Sahara Desert. In my opinion, the Aviator may be a little bit eccentric, but I like Jeff Bridges' performance, and also I think his narration for the Little Prince sequences are pretty darn good, if I say so myself. And while his house, the inside of it, is kind of messy, and I do like his plane in the backyard.
That's true. It's very fun. Even though his house is messy, it's really fun and wacky. And I think in general, to have the Aviator in the film in the capacity he is, because in the original story, the Aviator is the narrator, and in the play, the Aviator is the narrator. So to actually see who he is as a person, as opposed to an omniscient figure who's a narrator, is really fun, especially because he's definitely not perfect at all.
But it is pretty upsetting that nearing the end of the film, the Aviator is going to the hospital for, well, reasons that are not mentioned in the movie. Next, we come to the titular character, the Little Prince, voiced by Riley Osborne, who got to be a young Tai Lung from DreamWorks' Kung Fu Panda. While the Aviator is telling his story, the Prince is an eternal young boy and a resident of asteroid B612, strange name, which is actually a small asteroid roughly the same size as he is. But later in the movie, when the little girl meets him, he's seen as an adult, voiced by Ant-Man himself, Paul Rudd, who seems to have forgotten his own childhood and becomes an anxious janitor for the businessman. So, I feel like the young Little Prince is I think he's mostly like reminiscent to his character in the story, and I don't know, but I think I like his CGI design better than his stop motion design.
See, I feel the opposite way. I like his stop motion design more than his CGI design. I hate this thing in animation that's become really popular recently, where they have the big giant baby eyes. It's not that I want animation to be hyper realistic, but sometimes I find it kind of an obstacle to relate to animated characters when they look so. It's not cartoony, because of course they're cartoony, they're animated. They just look so like they're trying to make them look cute. Does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe it's just how we see it in our own way.
Yeah.
Next we have the Academy teacher, voiced by Paul Giamatti. This character is a dark, slim, tall, and sinister teacher who operates an academy, which is a place where children are transformed into workaholic adults. Though, I feel like this character is kind of like an Oz-style character, who is basically a character in the real world, but then reappears in another world.
That's true.
We also have Albert Brooks as the businessman, a workaholic person who owns the stars, and he generates money to buy more. However, later on, during the final climax, the businessman plays more of an antagonist who actually has the stars captive, and he actually turns anything that's non-essential into paper clips.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was an interesting choice, too, to make the businessman kind of the main antagonist, and the other characters that the Little Prince visits on the planet's more of, like, side antagonists, because in the original story, it's not really a comment on the fact that any of those three or any of the other two that were left out are antagonists per se. They are blinded by different things, and I think those different things that they're blinded by are things that adults in general seem to get distracted by. So I thought that was an interesting choice to make one the prime evil, if you will, because I think in the original story it's kind of implied that all of them are vanities that should be let go of.
Other characters in the film include Bud Cort as the king, who is the ruler of an asteroid and later becomes an elevator operator, Ricky Gervais as the conceited man, who has a strange personality, and he likes to tip his hat whenever someone claps, but later becomes a police officer. Marion Cotillard as the Rose, and Benicio del Toro as the Snake. Our last character to talk about is the Fox, who in the story sequence is voiced by James Franco. Now, for those who haven't read the book, this is a character whom the Little Prince cares for and tames, and eventually becomes one of his many friends on Earth. However, while I do think the Fox is a memorable character, and of course my favorite, mostly throughout the movie, he is seen as a stuffed animal who comes to life during the final climax. And what do you think about the Fox character?
Do you mean in general, or do you mean the difference between during the flashbacks and the stuffed animal?
The difference.
The difference? I think it's interesting. I think it does make sense that the little girl getting her own stuffed fox does. Her relationship to the stuffed fox mirrors the fox's relationship to the little prince, which I think is important and interesting. However, I do think some of the edge of the fox is lost in the stuffed animal because it's cute.
And also, I feel like James Franco does a good performance. I mean, he does do a good job giving off a sly tone in his voice.
It's true, I agree.
And now let's move on to our final words. Overall, The Little Prince was a good film, but not a perfect movie. I mean, yeah, it did have some good animation and, of course, well-done voice acting, though there were some parts that could have at least been written better, and it could have at least just focused mainly on the Little Prince, though. Also, the music was good too, but the final climax could have picked up its pace a bit. So, if you're interested in seeing a good adaptation of The Little Prince, then you may or may not find it here, but if you're curious, you should at least give it a watch.
Mm-hmm. I think this isn't, I wouldn't call it a good adaptation of The Little Prince. I think it's a good, different take on The Little Prince. I think that this chooses to do something in a film that hasn't been done before with the story, and I admire the film for making a bold and different choice.
So together, I think we give this film a rating of 75% out of 100. Well, that's all for today. I'd like to thank Sabrina for joining me for this episode.
Well, thanks for having me, Joshua. I'm happy to be here.
So, be sure to join me again for my next blog, Mustang Power.